Kina Collins is actually joining us, U.S. congressional candidate out of Illinois' 7th district. Kina, good evening, and thank you for joining us.
Oh my goodness, Brooke, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So tell our viewers, first up, I always ask, why are you running for Congress?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for 22 years, we've had the same leadership. And for 22 years, the cost of living has risen. Healthcare has become super unaffordable and our wages have remained the same. I think that we can be doing way better as a party. The messaging can be way stronger. And for me, the 2020 elections are about a return of representative democracy. And that means transparency, accountability, and putting working class families first.
So we have a clip here of your campaign announcement, and there's something you said in it that I want to ask you about. So first, let's take a look at that.
When I was 7, I saw a child shot and murdered in front of my home. I knew the victim, I knew the shooter, and ending gun violence in this country has fueled me ever since. My father is a factory worker. My mother, a crossing guard and certified nursing assistant. Both of them are union strong. Organizing is in my blood, from protests to policy. When we shut down Chicago fighting for justice, we exposed corruption and forced City Hall to clean house. Saying that the candidates who stand behind me are the best and the brightest. When the rights of women and girls were under attack in our country, I co-authored civil rights legislation in Illinois to protect them. Powerhouse women that not only changed Illinois policy, and I did not back down until we won. Now, we're taking the fight to Washington. We need leaders who will reject corporate money and take on difficult political fights with the urgency that each and every one of us deserve.
So I want to go back to that moment. You said when you were 7 years old, what happened there? And then also tell me how you think that shaped who you are as a candidate, who you could be as a congressperson.
Yeah, so they were teenagers from my neighborhood, from my block. And I'm from the city of Chicago, which is about 85% of the district that I'm running in. I was born and raised in this district, Brooke. And so I have the battle scars and the triumphs that have come along with growing up in a marginalized community in the Illinois 7th Congressional District. But these were just two teenagers from my neighborhood who somehow thought that the conflict resolution that they could have was by gunning each other down. And it changed the entire trajectory of my life. I went through Chicago Public Schools, K through 12. I became an anti-violence advocate, worked with the violence interrupters, and then went to school at Louisiana State University, where I became the Louisiana Regional Organizer for Gun Violence Prevention and Criminal Justice Reform through the Center for American Progress. And essentially, all across the country, I want to say that my story is unique, but 21 years later, and there are more 7-year-olds, not just in the city of Chicago, but across the country, who are watching their friends and their neighborhood, children in their neighborhood get gunned down too.
And so that brings up a question that I have, and I always think about this, and I want to ask someone who's from Chicago, absolutely. How national media, and even sometimes the president, and specifically the South Side of Chicago, and how it's spoken about, and how the narrative around that, and sometimes I watch it and I think that that's not all Chicago is. On one hand, these stories need to be reported and something needs to be done about this, but I think you get this idea that there are people just sitting around okay with it. And what are your thoughts when you see how these parts of Chicago are spoken about nationally?
It's extremely frustrating because the people who are boots on the ground are Black and brown residents, particularly and namely Black women and brown women in these communities who are on the front lines. They are getting the resources, crowdsourcing from the community because we're not getting the federal resources or the state resources that we need for mental health facilities, for looking at this as a public health epidemic. And so it is frustrating. And that was the impetus for my run. And actually my campaign color, one of the signature colors on my campaign is orange because I'm a gun violence prevention advocate. And I want every GOP member and I want the NRA and every corporate Dem to know that I'm coming for that seat. And so it's just to say that we need a return of representative democracy and we need the voices of those people in those communities speaking to what's happening. Now, what's interesting is Donald Trump in particular would love to talk about the city of Chicago and the violence that happens in Chicago, but we know that Illinois has some of the strictest gun laws in the country. And what he did was select Mike Pence as his VP pick, and Mike Pence was the governor of Indiana. Well, 85% of the guns illegally trafficked into Chicago come from Indiana. So, if we're going to talk about the violence and the guns that are on the streets, where do you think we got the guns from? And so we need wide sweeping reform, but we also need restorative justice practices and stop looking at this as through a punitive lens and more of a restorative lens.
Can we talk about Illinois' Council on Women and Girls Act? Am I right that you co-wrote that?
Absolutely. Yeah. In 2017, Donald Trump got rid of the White House Council on Women and Girls, which was an Obama-era policy that was brought up or headed by Tina Chin, Valerie Jarrett, and Mrs. Obama. And it essentially forced federal agencies to look at their policies through a gender lens. And so once I found out that it was eliminated on the federal level, I came back. I traveled to 68 counties out of 102 in the state of Illinois. And I co-authored House Bill 5544, the Illinois Council on Women and Girls Act, which protected the rights of the transgender community and non-binary community, centered the voices of women of color and working class women, and expanded reproductive health care and education. This was paramount in Illinois because we had no idea that the heartbeat bill was going to come or that the Georgia bill or Ohio bills were coming. And so I built a really strong coalition. We threw down, I took on the GOP, I took on a billionaire Republican governor in Illinois, and we won. And it is a living, breathing law now in Illinois.
So I want to talk more about you as a candidate. So let's try to get to some issues. We'll do like a rapid fire. Where do you stand on Medicare for all?
I support Medicare for all, single payer Medicare for all. And my job before I announced was serving as a national organizer, organizing doctors and medical students around Medicare for all.
And that's also something that I think I've seen you talk about. You had to forfeit your own health insurance to run for Congress, right?
Absolutely. So once I decided to run, I had to become a full-time candidate, which meant that I couldn't pay COBRA. I couldn't afford any of the premiums that were available. So. Yes, who can? Let's talk about criminal justice reform. You touched on that a little bit a second ago. What needs to be done? Yeah. I mean, it's a long list. But. Yeah. So number one is that in my district in particular, and many districts that look like mine, there's a decriminalizing, or we need to decriminalize poverty. There's a criminalization of poverty. And so we see people who are addicted to heroin or crack cocaine or different substances who have been thrown in jail and not given the treatment that they need, right? And so I believe in ending cash bail bond. I believe in looking at restorative justice practices as a means to come to a solution for criminal justice reform. Obviously, I don't believe in charging children as adults. I think we need to completely abolish capital punishment across the country. And I think that we need to also be looking at reentry into society. We need to restore the rights of individuals who have served time fully. And we have seen that that's been the biggest problem. Once folks come out of prison, they're not, their full rights are not restored.
You've also talked about the need to stop the influence of dark money in elections, right? Tell me more.
Yeah, so during my time at PNHP, where I was serving as a national organizer, organizing 20,000 doctors and medical students around single payer Medicare for all, we would do power rankings for congressional leaders who took the most big pharmaceutical money and big private insurance money. And lo and behold, my congressman, the incumbent, Congressman Davis, he was at the top of the list of taking hundreds of thousands of dollars from corporate PACs, big pharma, and private insurance. Now, this is important because in our district, we have the largest life expectancy gap in the country. So in a wealthy portion of our district, the average life expectancy is about 90 years of age. If you travel a 9-mile radius to the south side of Chicago, which is also in the district, the life expectancy drops to 60. So it's a 30-year life expectancy gap just based off of your zip code. And we know that it's not enough for politicians to stick their political flag in the ground and say they support Medicare for all, but you're taking money from corporate PACs and and big pharma and private insurance companies who don't care if we live or die. And so for me, our campaign is 100% not taking any corporate PAC money, no private equity money, no money from the gun lobby, obviously, and we're 100% people powered and grassroots.
So I want to read something that I found in a piece that you wrote in Al Jazeera, and I want you to break it down for our viewers. When the closest to the pain are closest to the power, the US will experience a true transformation.
Yeah, that piece was written, and I actually have an op-ed piece coming out through Teen Vogue about how Democrats love Black women until it's time to elect us. And so for me, that is not the impetus for my run, but representation does matter.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if we're talking about a party who says that we are the backbone of this party, then why are you not investing in the pipeline to elevate Black women into leadership? And so that's an issue that, I have in my district as well. My state rep, my city councilman, my Cook County commissioner, and my congressman are all men. That is not representative democracy, and we could be doing better as a party. And so that Al Jazeera article was just talking about how Black women, we're tired of being everyone's martyrs. We need to be elevated into leadership. And, we're going to try our hardest to continue to push that envelope and that message in this primary.
Kina Collins, thank you so much for being here with us. You are running for United States Congress in Illinois 7th District. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Brooke.
2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below. Then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.